A romantic Valentine's night took a deadly and shocking turn when Naomi Green, a dedicated police officer from Florida, walked into her home to discover an unimaginable betrayal. Her husband, Marcellus, was in bed with their 14-year-old son, Jalen. Consumed by a wave of uncontrollable rage, Naomi fired 15 rounds from her gun. A tragic event that ended in bloodshed. What could drive a person to commit such a horrific act? Was Naomi's response simply the desperate act of a wife betrayed? Or was there something much darker at play? And what role did their teenage son, Jalen, play in the nightmare that unfolded? Before we delve into the chilling details of this case, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Shocking True Crime Stories for more real-life cases that will leave you speechless. Naomi Green was the kind of officer people trusted. Her sharp instincts and unwavering commitment to justice earned her a stellar reputation in the Miami-Dade Police Department. With nearly a decade of service under her belt, Naomi had solved complex cases, comforted victims in their darkest moments, and earned the respect of both her colleagues and the community. To those who knew her, Naomi was more than just a cop. She was a protector, a woman who bore the weight of responsibility with pride and never faltered in her duty to uphold the law. However, Naomi's life was not just about her role as an officer, she was also a devoted wife and mother. She had married Marcellus Green at a young age, eager to build a life with a man who seemed to embody everything she had ever dreamed of: charming, ambitious, and determined to secure a stable future for their family. Marcellus swept Naomi off her feet in their early years, promising her the stability she had always longed for. His presence was commanding, and his smooth-talking charisma opened doors for him. Marcellus built a successful career in Miami's competitive real estate market, sealing high-stakes deals and making a name for himself. He was the type of man who could walk into a room and command attention, turning casual conversations into lucrative business opportunities. His success provided Naomi and Jalen with a comfortable life, luxury vacations, a beautiful home, and the best education for their son, who attended a private school. On the surface, the Green family appeared to have it all, a life full of privilege and opportunities. Their 14-year-old son, Jalen, was bright, introspective, and not like most kids his age. He wasn't interested in sports or video games. Instead, Jalen immersed himself in his passions, art and filmmaking. He spent hours sketching scenes from his imagination or editing short films on his computer. Jalen had dreams of becoming a filmmaker, capturing stories through his lens. Naomi was incredibly proud of her son's talent and creativity, and she balanced the demands of her job with nurturing his artistic gifts. Together, Naomi, Marcellus, and Jalen formed a close-knit family. Naomi worked hard to maintain the delicate balance between her demanding career and her role as a loving, attentive mother. Marcellus worked tirelessly to provide for their family. Their bond was built on love, respect, and shared goals, and their home was a place where their dreams aligned, each family member working toward a future they all believed in. But on the night of February 14, 2023, Naomi's world would be forever altered. In the weeks leading up to that night, Naomi couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong within her family. At first, it was just small, seemingly insignificant signs. Jalen, her bright, expressive son, had started becoming more withdrawn. He no longer talked about his latest video projects or sketches. His dream of becoming a filmmaker seemed to have faded. And now, when Naomi entered his room, he barely looked up from his desk. It wasn't just silence, it was avoidance. Every time Naomi tried to hug him, he tensed. When she asked how he was doing, he gave short, clipped answers, as if he were trying to escape from her. Then there was Marcellus. Naomi had always admired his charisma and confidence. But recently, something about him had started to feel off. For over a decade, he had been the kind of man people trusted instinctively, sealing business deals with a handshake and a smile. He had built a life for Naomi and Jalen that seemed perfect on paper. But lately, Naomi had begun to notice subtle changes. She noticed how he and Jalen would go quiet whenever she entered the room, their interactions marked by an uncomfortable tension. Marcellus had become secretive, always carrying his phone with him, dismissing notifications quickly whenever Naomi came near. It was as if he were hiding something. But Naomi, the seasoned officer, couldn't quite put her finger on it. Her instincts told her something was terribly wrong. But as a mother, she didn't want to believe it. She pushed aside the nagging feeling, wanting to hold on to the idea that her family was the same loving, stable unit they had always been. But nothing could have prepared her for the horror she was about to discover. On Valentine's night, Naomi walked into her home, expecting to find Marcellus waiting for her. Instead, she found a scene that would shatter her forever. The betrayal she witnessed would lead Naomi to make a decision that would change her life, and her family's, forever. Naomi had always trusted her instincts. The same instincts that made her one of the best officers on the force. She wasn't a woman who pried or let suspicion dictate her actions. But lately, something about her husband Marcellus's behavior had begun to unsettle her. Every time she entered a room, Jalen, their 14-year-old son, would stiffen, his posture changing in a way that made Naomi's concern grow. When Marcellus placed a hand on Jalen's shoulder, the tension was palpable, and Naomi noticed Jalen's discomfort. But it wasn't just the physical tension between father and son that caught her attention. It was Marcellus's constant attachment to his phone. It never left his side, always buzzing and lighting up with notifications that he quickly dismissed before she could get a glimpse. If Naomi so much as glanced in its direction, Marcellus would pick it up and walk away. A subtle but unmistakable act of secrecy. Naomi wasn't the jealous type. She and Marcellus had built their marriage on trust. Or so she had believed. She had never been suspicious of him. Never doubted the foundation they had created together. But her gut was telling her something was wrong. Her sharp instincts, honed from years of police work, screamed at her that there was something she wasn't seeing. But as a mother, she refused to believe it. She had convinced herself that it was just a passing phase. Something that would pass with time. Then came the night of February 14, 2023. Naomi had planned everything. It was supposed to be a romantic evening, a surprise dinner. Just the two of them. Life had been hectic lately, and Naomi wanted to bring back some of the warmth and intimacy they once shared. She left work early, stopping by the store to pick up wine and Marcellus's favorite dessert. As she drove home, she hummed along to the radio, thinking about how happy he would be when he saw what she had planned. She still had a smile on her face as she walked through the front door, expecting to find Marcellus waiting for her. But as soon as Naomi stepped inside, something felt off. The house was eerily quiet, too quiet. The living room was exactly as she had left it that morning. Neat and undisturbed, but there was no sound of the TV. No music playing, and no sign of Jalen. That in itself was strange. Jalen was always busy working on something, editing videos on his laptop, sketching his latest art projects. But tonight, there was nothing, just silence. Naomi's heart began to race. Then she heard it, a faint murmur, whispers, coming from upstairs. Her stomach tightened, and her pulse quickened as she climbed the staircase. Her shoes were silent against the carpeted steps. But the closer she got to the bedroom, the clearer the whispers became. Naomi's heart pounded in her chest as her body tensed, a feeling of dread washing over her. Something was terribly wrong. She reached the door, the light inside the room casting an eerie glow in the dark hallway. The whispers stopped the moment she arrived. Naomi hesitated for just a second, her fingers hovering over the doorknob. She thought about knocking, but her instincts as a cop, the instincts that had kept her alive in dangerous situations, told her not to wait. She had to see for herself. She pushed the door open, and in that moment, the world stopped. Marcellus was there, so was Jalen. Naomi's mind struggled to process the scene unfolding before her. Her husband, the man she had trusted, the man who had once promised her the world, was in bed with their son. His shirt was unbuttoned, his belt undone. Jalen, her baby, was curled up against the headboard, his face streaked with tears. His body trembled uncontrollably, his hands clutching the sheets so tightly his knuckles turned white. He was frozen, paralyzed, trapped in a moment he couldn't escape. For a moment, there was no sound. Naomi couldn't breathe. Her body went cold, and her ears rang so loudly she could barely hear her own breath. The air in the room felt suffocating, thick with something unspeakable. Marcellus moved first, yanking his belt back through the loops, fumbling with his shirt, his eyes wide with shock. Panic. "Baby, I don't," he stammered. Naomi could barely speak, her voice a mere whisper. "What is this?" she asked, the words barely escaping her lips. Jalen's eyes locked onto hers, They were pleading, silent, full of fear. Naomi's stomach twisted as the sickening realization crashed over her. This wasn't the first time. She felt her knees buckle. But she caught herself just in time. A deep, guttural scream ripped from her throat, shaking the walls. "What the hell is this?" Marcellus stepped toward her, his hands raised in a futile attempt to control the situation. "Naomi, listen to me." He tried to speak, but Naomi wasn't listening anymore. She wasn't a cop in that moment. She was a mother. Her fingers instinctively wrapped around her gun. And without thinking, she pulled the trigger. The sound of the gunshot filled the room. And everything changed forever. Naomi's training kicked in. But not in the way it was supposed to. "I'm calling 911. She choked out. Jalen flinched at the words, his whole body jerking as though struck. Marcellus took another step forward. His voice smooth. Too smooth. "Naomi, put the gun down. This isn't what you think. Let's talk about this." He spoke as if he still believed he could manipulate her. As if he could make her doubt what she had just seen with her own eyes. Naomi's grip tightened around the gun. She wasn't doubting anything. "Get away from me," she hissed. Jalen made a noise. Something between a sob and a gasp. Naomi's eyes flicked to him. Just for a second. That was when Marcellus lunged. He moved fast, his hand shooting out, trying to grab her wrist and take the gun. He had always been stronger. But Naomi had something he didn't, pure, unfiltered rage. Without thinking, she pulled the trigger. The first shot hit him in the chest. He stumbled back, his eyes wide in disbelief. She fired again and again. Marcellus staggered, hitting the dresser and knocking over the framed wedding photo that had sat there for years. The glass shattered as it hit the floor. But Naomi didn't stop. 15 shots. 15. Each one burned with betrayal, fury, and the unbearable pain of knowing she had been sleeping beside a monster. The last shot echoed through the room. And then there was silence. Marcellus's body slumped to the floor, blood spreading across the white carpet. His eyes, once so full of life, stared at nothing. It was over. The gun felt heavy in Naomi's hands. She could hear her own heartbeat and feel the tremors coursing through her body. But all of that faded when she turned to Jalen. He hadn't moved. His chest rose and fell in shallow, uneven breaths. His lips were parted, his face pale. For the first time since she entered the room, he made a sound, a broken, whispered word. "Mom." Then, from downstairs, the sound of sirens. The neighbors had heard the gunshots. The police were coming. Naomi's breath hitched. She had just killed her husband. And her son had watched it all. The gunfire had shattered the silence of the house, echoing through the walls and spilling out into the night. The smell of gunpowder mixed with something metallic, the smell of blood. Naomi stood frozen, her chest rising and falling in sharp, uneven breaths. The gun in her hand felt heavier than it ever had before. Marcellus wasn't moving. He wasn't breathing. The only sound in the room was the steady drip of blood soaking into the white carpet. The distant hum of the city outside. But inside this room, inside this house, time had stopped. Jalen hadn't moved either. He was still pressed against the headboard, his body trembling. His face, God, his face, was a mixture of terror, disbelief, and relief. Then, piercing through the heavy silence, the sirens grew louder, closer. The neighbors must have heard the shots. Maybe someone had already called 911. Naomi blinked, her vision blurry, her mind spun, but she knew what came next. She had been on the other side of this scene too many times to count. But this time, she wasn't the cop walking in with her gun drawn, assessing the damage. This time, she was the one standing over the body. The blue and red lights flashed through the window. Voices shouted from outside. Her fellow officers, her colleagues, the people she had worked with for years, were closing in. Then, there was banging on the door. Miami-Dade police. Open up. More voices. More footsteps. Then the sound of the door being kicked in. Naomi didn't move. She couldn't. It wasn't until the first officer stormed into the bedroom, his gun raised, that reality snapped back into place. Drop your weapon. For a split second, Naomi's training told her to respond, to de-escalate. But then she realized she was the threat now. Slowly, she loosened her grip on the gun. It slipped from her fingers and clattered to the floor. Get on your knees. Hands behind your head, they commanded. Naomi complied, her arms yanked roughly behind her, cold steel cuffs locking around her wrists. Someone shouted. More officers flooding the room. Securing the scene. Suspect in custody. Male victim down. Multiple gunshot wounds. And we need M's for the kid. Another officer added. Naomi's head snapped toward Jalen. Two officers were kneeling beside him, checking for injuries, speaking in low, careful voices. But Jalen wasn't answering them. His eyes were locked on Naomi, and in that moment, she knew that nothing would ever be the same again. Jalen wasn't answering them. His eyes remained locked on Naomi. His lips slightly parted as if he wanted to speak, but couldn't find the words. Tears spilled down his face. Silent and endless, they pulled Naomi to her feet, leading her out of the room, past the lifeless body of the man she had once loved, and past the broken shards of their wedding photo on the floor. The walk through the house felt surreal. This was the home she had built with Marcellus. The home filled with birthday parties, late-night movies, and family dinners. It was all gone now. Everything had changed in a single night. By the time they got her outside, the street was filled with flashing lights, squad cars, and news vans already setting up their cameras. A crowd had gathered, their faces pale with shock. Someone gasped, while others whispered, "That's Naomi Green, a decorated officer. A respected cop, now a murderer." She didn't say a word as they placed her in the back of the police car. The doors shut, muffling the chaos outside. At the station, everything happened in a blur, the booking process, fingerprinting, and the mugshot. Naomi barely registered any of it. The only thing she cared about was Jalen. "Where's my son?" she asked the second she was taken into the interrogation room. The detective across from her, a man she had worked with on countless cases, folded his hands together. "He's in protective custody." Naomi exhaled, her shoulders slumping. Jalen was safe. That was all that mattered. When they asked for her statement, she told them everything. She didn't hesitate. She didn't sugarcoat anything. She told them about the whispers, the tension, the way Jalen had changed over the last few months. She told them how she had ignored her instincts for too long. How she had walked into that bedroom and seen the unthinkable. Then, she told them about the moment she snapped. The moment she stopped thinking like a cop and started thinking like a mother. The detective listened, never interrupting. He just nodded, taking notes. His expression was unreadable. When she finished, there was a long silence. "You understand what's going to happen now?" he finally asked. "I understand," Naomi replied. He studied her for a moment. "Do you regret it?" Naomi met his gaze without blinking. "I did what any mother would do," she said. "I protected my son." The courtroom was suffocating, packed with reporters, legal analysts, and members of the public who had followed the case from the moment the news broke. It was a circus of flashing cameras and murmured speculation. Naomi Green sat at the defense table, her hands clasped together, her face expressionless. The weight of the past few months had settled deep into her bones. But she refused to let it show. She had spent years as a cop, trained to keep her emotions in check. Now, more than ever, she needed that skill. But this wasn't just another case. This wasn't just another defendant sitting before a judge, awaiting a fate decided by strangers. This time, it was her. In the front row, her son sat, his hands clenched in his lap, his shoulders hunched as if he were trying to disappear. Jalen hadn't spoken much since that night, not to her, not to his family, and not even to the therapists who had tried to coax words out of him. He had spent weeks in a near catatonic state, going through the motions, barely eating, barely sleeping. It was like something inside him had fractured. Naomi feared that no amount of time would ever be enough to repair it. She had tried to explain, tried to reach out in the only way she could, from behind bars. Through letters, through messages sent via her lawyer, and through the few times she had been allowed to see him. She had sat across from him in the cold, sterile visitor's room at the jail, his eyes hollow, his voice barely above a whisper. But the truth was, Naomi didn't know if he would ever forgive her. She had killed his father, and now she was going to pay the price. The prosecution wasted no time. She fired 15 shots, the lead prosecutor said, his voice sharp as a knife. Not one, not two, 15. This was not self-defense. This was not a split-second decision. This was cold-blooded murder. Naomi swallowed hard, but she kept her face neutral. She knew what they were doing, painting her as an executioner. A woman consumed by rage. A police officer who had broken her oath. Naomi Green had sworn to uphold the law. But on that fateful night, she took justice into her own hands. The prosecution presented witnesses who had heard the gunshots, neighbors who had seen her standing over Marcellus's body, gun still in hand. First responders described the scene in vivid detail, recounting how they had found Naomi in the aftermath. Forensics experts laid out the evidence, detailing the trajectory of each bullet, and the crime scene photos they showed were so gruesome that some members of the jury turned away in discomfort. Then came the moment Naomi had been dreading, the moment she knew would make or break her case. Jalen was called to the stand. The courtroom fell silent as he slowly walked up, his movements deliberate, as if he were carrying something fragile inside of him that might shatter if he stepped too hard. He sat down, his fingers twisting together in his lap, and the defense attorney approached him gently. "Jalen, can you tell us about your relationship with your father?" the attorney asked. Jalen hesitated, his throat working as he swallowed hard. For a moment, Naomi wasn't sure he would answer. Then, in a voice so quiet it was almost a whisper, he said, "He wasn't who everyone thought he was." A murmur rippled through the courtroom, and Naomi's chest tightened. The attorney nodded encouragingly. "Can you explain what you mean by that?" Jalen's fingers clenched. His whole body seemed to shrink inward. He hurt me," he whispered, his voice wavering. He took a shaky breath but continued. "For months, I was scared. I didn't tell anyone because I thought no one would believe me." His eyes flickered toward the prosecution table and then back down at the floor. "He always told me that if I told my mom, she would hate me, that it would ruin everything." Naomi's nails dug into her palms, the reality of what was happening crashing down on her. The jury watched Jalen now, their faces a mix of shock and sympathy. The prosecutor, who had been so sharp and unyielding in his questioning, now looked uneasy, shifting in his seat. And on the night of February 14th, the prosecutor pressed, "What happened?" Jalen inhaled shakily. I was in his room. He told me to stay quiet. But then the door opened, and my mom was there." His hands clenched tighter, and he looked down. She just started screaming." Naomi's heart ached, and she wanted to reach out to hold him, to comfort him, to tell him it was okay, that she had done what she had done because she loved him and had to protect him. But she couldn't. Jalen's voice cracked as he continued. "She tried to call 911, but he tried to stop her. And then she shot him." There it was. The truth laid bare before the court. Naomi's heart shattered. She had acted out of desperation, out of love for her son. But hearing his words, seeing the pain in his eyes, made it all the more real. She couldn't undo it. She couldn't take it back. The jury deliberated for 3 long days. When they finally returned with a verdict, Naomi forced herself to remain still, to keep her expression calm. No matter what the decision was, she knew she would have to accept it. The judge looked solemn as he read the verdict. Guilty of voluntary manslaughter. A rush of sound filled the room. Whispers, gasps, the frantic scribbling of reporters. Naomi exhaled slowly. Not murder, not life in prison, but still, she wasn't free. The judge continued. This court recognizes the deep emotional weight of this case. The pain suffered by both the victim's son and the defendant is immeasurable. However, justice cannot be served through vigilante action. The law must still apply. A pause. Naomi Green is sentenced to 25 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 15. A sharp gasp echoed through the courtroom, and Naomi wasn't sure if it came from her or from someone in the crowd. 25 years. The bailiff approached, and Naomi turned her head, searching for Jalen. Their eyes met across the courtroom. She mouthed the words, "I love you," for the first time in months. Jalen didn't look away. Tears shimmered in his eyes. And then Naomi was led away. This case forces us to confront difficult questions. Was Naomi justified in her actions? Should she have let the law handle it? Or did the justice system fail to recognize the instinct of a mother who snapped in the face of horror? What would you have done if you were in Naomi's shoes? Do you think justice was served? If this case shocked you, like and subscribe to Shocking Real-Life Crime Stories for more real-life cases that reveal the darkest corners of human nature.